Ever since I was a little kid, I would think about the biggest questions, such as what is the meaning of life? What defines a person? What makes something morally correct? I have always thought about these questions, but now I'm taking a deeper dive into what I truly believe, and I believe that these answers will give me a more profound view of how I am going to live my life. Philosophy is the study of the most fundamental truths. It helps us tackle the biggest questions, and it helps us to make better decisions about society and in our personal lives. I think that philosophy is one of the most fundamental ways that humans are different than any other animal, is that we are capable of understanding things through a more complex lens than almost any other species, and we're able to dig deeper into the biggest of problems. There are multiple branches of philosophy, such as metaphysics, which is the study of major questions like what is the meaning of life? Is there a God? It is to dig deeper into the nature of our reality. Epistemology is the study of truth, and how do we know truth is in fact truth when everything is so subjective. Ethics, how do we know things are ethical when our world is so complex and nuanced? And political and social philosophy is how do we conduct our society in a way that will benefit everyone as much as possible. And aesthetics is why do we find things beautiful? Is it related to God? Is it built into us, or is it something we learn? And logic is how do we decide how to think? This is most clear in subjects such as formal logic. The chariot analogy is Socrates' view of the self. The chariot driver is the one who has the reins. It's the logic. It's the brains behind the actions. The two horses are our desires. Our pleasant ones are the white horse, and the black horse is our less founded desires, the ones that will drive us off the path of a great life, essentially. I think that Socrates' views are actually very founded and interesting, and I actually agree with the point that that logic should in fact be the driving factor of your life, and your emotions should only be indicators of how you feel. Who are you? It may sound like an interesting question, but in reality, it's not so complicated. Who are you? I'm Alex Pavelli. I like to play soccer. I'm in school. I have lots of different hobbies. I have friends. But those are just things that are associated with me. They don't actually get to the heart of the question. I'm a human. What else can you say? It's impossible to know. In reality, I think that I am the brain. I believe in physicalism. I don't believe in the idea that we have a continuous life force that keeps us going. I don't believe that we have a soul. I think at the end of the day, our brain states represent our emotions, which can create a conscious projection of who we are, and creates the ego and creates the idea of who we actually are. I think that the ideas of the soul are simply just whispers of what we have now in terms of scientific knowledge. So I think that I would describe myself as a physicalist and identifying with brain states. But another idea that has actually really helped to open my horizons is the Buddhist view of the self. The idea that we are not, in fact, we don't truly exist in the way that we think we do. the self is just, it's an illusion. It's an illusion that makes us see who we think we are. We have a soul in the Buddhist view. It's just not unified. It doesn't stick to the same form in every incarnation. You look different in every incarnation. In one life you're a fish. In one life you're a bird. In the next life you're a monkey. In the next life you're a human. Nothing stays the same. It's only the person experiencing it that's the same. At the end of the day, I think that the Buddhist view of the self is really good and really interesting. I just don't think it's the number one absolute truth. And also for Freud's view of the self, I fundamentally disagree with it. The idea that we have an ID, a ego, and a superego. The ID is what Freud describes as the earthly desires. It's the urge to eat, to drink, to procreate. And then the superego is our desire for moral perfection. And our ego is what unites the two. At the end of the day, I disagree with 95% of what Freud says in almost all areas. However, he was a great thinker, and he has actually progressed the field of psychology to a great extent. So I think that his ideas on the self were in the right direction. I just think they were overly pragmatic and overall do not represent the true states of the human condition. Do we have free will? This is one of the most important questions in philosophy. There are three main takes that philosophers use to describe whether they believe in free will or not. First of all, determinism. Determinists usually say that the future is fixed and is not in our control. Events such as brain states, genetics, and your socioeconomic status are huge indicators of whether you will be successful or if you will live a long life or the choices you will make. Compatibilism is similar. It tries to unify the two different types of determinism and libertarianism. It says that the future is fixed, but is still in our control. It's an interesting take and is more of the camp that I fall into. I would say that I don't 100% believe in the future being fixed, but I also don't believe that it's 100% in our control either. So I think that this is an incredibly valid point. In libertarianism is the idea that we still have genetics and we still have brain states that control for some of the things in our life, but we can still break free of them as long as we are aware of the constraints, is what they're called in philosophy. We can still think about whether we want to be controlled or not. This is a philosophical take that states that we are in control of our future. I believe that we, in fact, are not in control of our future. I believe that this is backed up by brain states being some of the most indicative points of whether we will be able to choose something or not. And I also believe that it's a very practical take, because if you believe that if everyone is in control of their future, then it makes it harder to be empathetic towards them and the struggles that they're facing. In the past, I believed that free will was more beneficial, but now I realize this is incredibly nuanced and is basically just the default take until you learn about more of the challenges to this point. Hi, Mom. I'm glad that you're able to join me for the philosophy interview today.
Happy to be here, Alex.
What do you think the biggest question in life is?
I think it is, what does the afterlife look like? So we all know, what this life is like, and we don't know what comes next. That's kind of the big mystery.
Interesting.
That I think everyone wonders about.
Yes, very true, very true. So, what do you think the structure and function of the self is, and do we have a soul?
Yes, I definitely think we're more than just like a body and a bunch of cells. Something to explain why we're all different. I don't know why we think differently. I don't know, but I like the idea of the ancient Egyptian belief system where they had like different words for the different parts of us. So they thought like there's different parts of us, our physical body, and I can't remember the name for that, but your ka was like your like kind of like a spirit, your soul, something that's inherited from your ancestors and passed down to you when you're born, but kind of separate from your body. And then the ba is like your personality and things like that, your station in life, your wealth, things like that. But so like there's all these different parts of you that maybe so then they thought they all kind of disperse when you die, and the goal is to try to make a mummy so they can all come back together again. That's where it gets a little bit wacky for me, but I do think it kind of makes sense.
Makes sense, the core idea of that. Socrates believed that an unexamined life is not worth living. Do you agree with that?
No, because I think your life can still have meaning and purpose, even if you're not a deep thinker. And especially, I think so many people try to avoid thinking about, the meaning of life, the afterlife, because it's, can be stressful and stuff. So they do a lot of avoidance behaviors, and that could be like drugs, or it could just be staying busy, with day-to-day stuff. But, say they're a nurse or something, but they just want to stay busy all the time and not think about that, but their life still has purpose.
Yes, true. Good idea. Do you think that we have free will?
I think sort of. I think technically, yes, if we lived in a vacuum and then could just do whatever we want all the time, but we don't, and so really we're just kind of reacting to our circumstances, to all these things that happen to us. So I guess we could have free will, and even on a desert island. Probably not totally though, because you're still dependent on the weather and what you find to eat and your health and stuff like that.
That's true. From the way that I think of it, I think that free will is a real thing, but it's limited by real circumstances, because so few things are truly in your control, that I think that the brain over time has learned to develop its own ways of thinking of things and making the choices as minimal as possible for your conscious mind. So I think that there is a lot of complexity and nuance that goes into this debate. So what is your best piece of life advice?
I don't know. There's a lot of things I could talk about here, but I think just to try to be a well-rounded person and almost think of it like a pie chart, and how much of your time do you want to spend on work, and how much on family, and how much on taking care of yourself. But all are important, or thinking about meditating and thinking about life and the bigger issues and stuff. But especially for you tend to sometimes get super hyper focused on one new thing that really interests you, and to always maybe sometimes take a step back. That's fine, because that's just kind of how your brain works, but sometimes take a step back and like, oh, am I focusing enough on these other aspects, and is it balanced and stuff?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that being well-rounded definitely is very important in life. And I think that working on the things that you are especially weaker in, like your weaker aspects, is something that's really important, especially for this newer generation. I think that the focus and productivity is something this generation is really lacking in some ways. But yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast, Mom. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah, this was fun.
It was, yes.
Good luck, Alex.
Based off the answers that my mom gave in the interview, I had some interesting thoughts that kind of changed the way that I thought in some ways. I think that an unexamined life is still worth living, because even though you don't tap into your full potential and you don't create the life that was possible for you, I think it's still possible to have a really fun life and just kind of go along the path that fate has created for you, I should say. It's actually still a really worthwhile endeavor, and I think that all lives in some way or another are still worth living and still do have the potential to get better. I think that I'm still the master of my fate in some ways, as long as I do think about my life and I continue to self-reflect and I think about my values, something that everyone could benefit from. And to think about the reason why I am here, and if there is a reason in general. I think that also the structure of the self is another area that I think my mom brought up a really cool point, in that I think there is possibly a life force, and I think that there is actually a really good argument to be made that even if we can't prove that there is no self, I think there is still some benefit to believing there is some sort of divinity. And I think it's like a viewpoint that I'm going to look at further in the future, that I think could actually add a lot of interesting stuff to my life if I continue to examine it. And I think that also examining one's life actually does intersect with my idea of faith, because I do believe that everyone should try to have the best life that they possibly can at the end of the day. We're all just floating around on a little rock in space. And if you choose to not get the totality of your life and live it to the best of its ability, it doesn't really matter. You're only here for a short period of time. And I think that the regrets that you have in the future are just going to be little blips in the grand scheme of the universe. Ultimately, I don't think any of the stuff here really matters in the grand scheme of things, and I think that that's not really a bad thing at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you can't take life too seriously, because you just have to appreciate the ride that we're all on. And I know that at one point in time, life will be hard for everyone. But also, life continues. And I think that I would just want to keep living this wonderful life.